The train's whistle screamed through the frozen dawn, and Colton Reeves saw something that would shatter 3 lives forever, a bundle between the rails, seconds from being torn apart by 10,000 tons of steel. Inside that dirty blanket wasn't just a baby, it was a secret someone was willing to kill for. This is a story about the child nobody wanted, the mother who never stopped searching, and the 2 strangers who became her only chance at survival. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The cold hit different at 4 in the morning. Colton Reeves had been working cattle ranches since he was 14, and he thought he'd felt every kind of miserable the Colorado frontier could throw at a man. Summer heat that cooked you inside your own shirt, dust storms that stripped skin off your knuckles, winter winds that found every gap in your coat and settled there like broken glass. But this particular flavor of freezing, the kind that came right before dawn in late November, when the world was still black and the frost hadn't decided whether to turn into snow, this was something meaner. This was the kind of cold that made your lungs ache just breathing it in. He pulled his collar tighter and guided his horse, Rusty, along the ridge above the railroad tracks. The gelding's breath came out in thick clouds that vanished into the darkness. Somewhere to the east, barely visible against the ink-black sky, the mountains were waiting for sunrise like they'd been doing for 1,000,000 years before Colton was born and would keep doing long after he was dust. The Ridge Hollow rail line cut through the valley below, 2 parallel strips of iron that caught what little moonlight there was and threw it back cold and indifferent. Colton had been riding fence line for the Hendricks spread when he'd heard something that didn't belong. A sound that wasn't wind, wasn't an animal, wasn't anything he could place. A cry, thin, high, human. He'd almost convinced himself he'd imagined it when he heard it again. Rusty's ears swiveled forward, catching something Colton's frozen brain was still trying to process. The horse stopped without being asked, every muscle suddenly tense. "Easy," Colton muttered, more to himself than the animal. That's when he saw it, down between the rails, maybe 60 yards ahead. A dark shape that didn't match the landscape, too round, too deliberate. At first his mind tried to make it into something logical, a sack of grain that fell off a freight car maybe, or somebody's lost bedroll. Then it moved. Not much, just a small shift, the way a living thing shifts when it's trying to stay warm. Colton's heart kicked against his ribs. He touched his heels to Rusty's sides, and the horse picked his way down the slope, careful on the loose rock and frozen dirt. The closer they got, the more wrong everything felt, because there was something else now. A sound underneath the wind, a vibration in the ground that Colton recognized the way you recognize your own heartbeat. A train was coming. He couldn't see it yet. The track curved around the far ridge, but he could feel it. Every rancher who worked land near the rails knew that feeling. The way the earth started humming about 5 minutes before the locomotive came into view, the way small stones would start dancing on the rail bed, the way birds would scatter from the telegraph wires. The bundle between the tracks moved again. Colton dismounted before he'd fully decided to, his boots hitting the frozen ground hard enough to send a spike of pain up through his knees. He left Rusty ground-tied and ran toward the tracks, his coat flapping behind him like broken wings. 20 yards out, he could make out details. Fabric. Something wrapped in cloth tied with what looked like twine. Dark stains that could have been dirt or could have been something worse. 15 yards. The vibration in the rails was stronger now. He could hear it, a low bass note that meant the train was maybe 2 minutes away, maybe less. 10 yards. The bundle made a sound that stopped Colton's breath in his throat. It was crying, not loud, not the healthy wail of a baby demanding attention. This was weaker, tired, the sound of something that had been crying for a long time and didn't have much left. Colton's boots hit the rail bed and he was skidding between the tracks, going down on his knees hard enough that he felt something pop, but didn't care because his hands were already reaching for the bundle and pulling it toward his chest. The fabric was frozen stiff in places. His fingers fumbled with the twine, got it loose. The blanket fell open. A baby. Couldn't have been more than a few days old, maybe a week at most. Tiny fists curled against a face that was too pale, too still. The crying had stopped. For one terrible second, Colton thought he was too late. Thought he was kneeling between train tracks in the freezing dark, holding a dead child. Then those little fists moved. Barely. Just a flutter. The whistle screamed. Colton's head snapped up. He could see it now, coming around the bend maybe half a mile out. The locomotive's headlamp cut through the pre-dawn like a judgment, bright and merciless and coming fast. He scrambled to his feet, the baby clutched against his chest with one arm while the other windmilled for balance. His boot caught on a railroad tie, and he went down, landing hard on his shoulder on the far side of the tracks. The impact knocked the air out of his lungs, but he kept his arm curved around the baby, kept her protected even as the ground tore up his coat and probably his skin underneath. The train was a wall of sound now. Metal screaming against metal, the whole world shaking, the headlamp so bright it bleached everything white. Colton rolled. Once, twice, putting distance between himself and those rails. The locomotive roared past close enough that the wind of it pulled at his clothes, close enough that for just a second he could see the engineer's face in the cab window, eyes wide, mouth open, shouting something Colton couldn't hear over the thunder of 60 freight cars. Then it was past. The sound started fading, Doppler shifting down into something almost normal. The red light on the caboose got smaller and smaller until it was just a pinprick in the distance, and then it was gone around the next bend, and the world went quiet except for the ringing in Colton's ears. He lay there on the frozen ground, breathing hard, his heart trying to beat its way out through his chest. The baby was still. Too still. "Come on," he whispered. His voice came out rough, barely recognizable. "Come on, don't you quit on me." He got his coat open with shaking fingers and pulled the child inside against his shirt, trying to share what little warmth he had. The blanket she'd been wrapped in fell away, and something dropped out of the folds. A piece of paper, folded once. Colton picked it up. The handwriting was shaky, done in pencil that had been pressed down hard enough to tear through in places. Unwanted. That was it. One word. No explanation, no apology, no nothing. Just unwanted. Something cold and sharp settled in Colton's gut, and it had nothing to do with the November morning. He looked down at the tiny face pressed against his chest. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was shallow, but it was there, a small rise and fall against his ribs. "Well," he said quietly, "that makes two of us, I guess." Rusty was waiting where Colton had left him, ground-tied and patient, the way a good horse is patient. Colton pulled himself up into the saddle one-handed, keeping the baby tucked inside his coat. His shoulder was screaming where he'd hit the ground, but there wasn't time to worry about that now. The sky was starting to lighten in the east. Not much, just enough to turn the black into something closer to deep blue. Ridge Hollow was 3 miles south. Colton turned Rusty's head and touched his heels to the horse's sides. They covered the distance faster than was probably smart given the terrain and the lighting, but Colton couldn't bring himself to slow down. Every minute mattered. The baby had gone quiet again in a way that scared him more than the crying had. Ridge Hollow wasn't much of a town. Maybe 200 people on a good day, most of them tied to either the railroad or the handful of ranches that operated in the valley. There was a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a schoolhouse, and Doc Morrison's office, which doubled as the closest thing they had to a hospital. Colton rode straight down the middle of that street as the sun was just starting to pink up the horizon. A few early risers stared at him from doorways and windows. He ignored them. There'd be time for questions later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting to the doc's office before what? Before the baby died? Before whatever warmth she was stealing from his body ran out? He didn't let himself finish the thought. Doc Morrison's place sat on the corner of Main and Porter, a 2-story building that had seen better days. Colton half fell off Rusty and took the front steps 2 at a time. The door was locked. He pounded on it hard enough to make the frame shake. "Doc! Doc Morrison! Open up!" Nothing. He pounded again, harder. A window rattled open on the second floor. Doc Morrison stuck his head out, gray hair standing up in all directions, squinting down without his spectacles. "What in the blazes? Reeves, that you? Got an emergency. It's 5 in the damn morning. I know what time it is. Open the door." Something in Colton's voice must have registered because the window slammed shut, and 30 seconds later the bolt on the front door scraped back. Doc Morrison stood there in a nightshirt and trousers he'd clearly just pulled on, looking annoyed until he saw what Colton was holding. His expression changed. Inside. Now. The office smelled like carbolic acid and old coffee. Doc cleared a space on the examination table with one sweep of his arm, sending papers and instruments clattering to the floor. Put her down, gently. Colton did, his hands reluctant to let go. The baby looked even smaller on the table, even more fragile. Doc was already working, his fingers moving over the child with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, breathing, temperature. Where'd you find her? Railroad tracks, between the rails. Train missed her by maybe 10 seconds. Doc's hands didn't stop moving, but his eyes flicked up to Colton's face. Someone left her there? Looks that way. Christ. Doc peeled back one of the baby's eyelids, checking pupil response. She's hypothermic, dehydrated, probably hasn't eaten since she was born. When was that, you figure? I don't know. Few days? More like a week. Doc grabbed a blanket from a cabinet and started wrapping the baby. She's lucky you found her. Another hour and we'd be planning a funeral. The words hit Colton harder than they should have. He leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how tired he was, how much his shoulder hurt, how his hands wouldn't stop shaking. She gonna make it? Doc Morrison looked at him for a long moment. I don't know yet. She's in bad shape, Reeves, real bad. I'll do what I can, but... He trailed off, turned back to the baby. You should go get Clara. Clara? Whitmore, the school teacher. This child needs feeding, and unless you've sprouted the necessary equipment in the last 5 minutes, we're going to need a woman who knows what she's doing. Colton nodded. His brain felt slow, like it was moving through cold molasses. Right, Clara. Where? Boarding house on 7th. Widow Brennan's place. Go. The sun was full up by the time Colton reached the boarding house. It was a neat little building, white paint that hadn't started peeling yet, black shutters, a porch with actual furniture on it instead of broken crates. The kind of place that said the owner gave a damn. He knocked. Softer this time. It was still early, and he had enough awareness left to know that pounding on a respectable widow's door at this hour was a good way to get a shotgun pointed at your face. The woman who answered wasn't Widow Brennan. She was younger, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a braid that was already starting to come loose and eyes that were sharp even at this ungodly hour. She looked Colton up and down, taking in the dirt on his coat, the blood on his knuckles, the general state of barely controlled disaster he probably represented. If you're drunk, she said, you've got the wrong door. I'm not drunk. Are you Clara Whitmore? I am. Doc Morrison sent me. Says he needs your help with something. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of something? A baby. That got her attention. The wariness in her face shifted into something else, concern maybe mixed with curiosity. What baby? One I found on the railroad tracks about an hour ago. Can you come? Doc says she needs feeding and I don't... He gestured helplessly at himself. I don't know what to do. Clara stared at him for 3 long seconds. Then she turned her head and called back into the house. Mrs. Brennan, I'll be out for a while. Emergency? A voice from somewhere inside. This early? Apparently, Clara grabbed a shawl from a hook by the door and wrapped it around her shoulders. Let's go, Mr. Reeves. Colton Reeves. Mr. Reeves. She stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind her. Start talking while we walk. So he did. Told her about the sound that brought him to the tracks, about the bundle between the rails, about the train that almost turned a bad situation into an unspeakable one. He left out some details. The way his hands had shaken, the way his heart had stopped when he thought the baby was already dead. The single word written on that piece of paper. Clara listened without interrupting, her face giving nothing away. When they reached Doc Morrison's office, she went straight inside without knocking, all business now, moving with the kind of confidence that said she'd been in emergency situations before. Doc looked up from the table where the baby lay bundled in blankets. Thank Christ, Clara, I need you to... I see her. Clara was already at the table, her hands gentle as she unwrapped the blankets enough to get a look. Her expression tightened. How long has she been like this? Since Reeves brought her in, maybe an hour. She needs milk. Goat's milk if we can get it, cow's if we can't. Warmed, not hot, and we need to get her temperature up slowly. I'll send someone to the Peterson farm for goat's milk. Doc looked at Colton. You still standing there? Colton realized he was. Standing in the doorway like he'd grown roots, watching Clara work. You need me to go? You look like hell. Get some food, get some rest. Come back this afternoon. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your coat. That shoulder needs looking at. Colton glanced down. Sure enough, there was a dark patch spreading across his left shoulder where he'd hit the ground. He hadn't even noticed. It can wait. Doc Morrison opened his mouth like he was about to argue, but Clara cut him off. Let him stay if he wants. He can make himself useful. So Colton stayed. Made himself useful by running to the Peterson farm for goat's milk, by heating water on Doc's stove, by holding blankets and fetching supplies, and generally doing whatever Clara or Doc told him to do. His shoulder throbbed and his hands still had a tremor in them, but he ignored both. The baby's name became the first argument. It was Clara who brought it up, around noon when the baby had finally taken some milk and her color was starting to look less like death warmed over. She needs a name. Doc Morrison looked up from his notes. Isn't that something for whoever takes her in? And who's going to do that? Claire's voice had an edge to it. Orphanage in Denver is full up. I already checked. Closest place with room is in Wyoming, and they're not taking infants right now. So what are you suggesting? Clara looked at Colton. You found her. You should name her. Colton stared at the baby. She was sleeping now, tiny fists curled against her face. Something in his chest did a weird twist. I don't know anything about naming babies. Neither do most people before they have one. I'm not... He stopped. Wasn't sure how to finish that sentence. I'm a ranch hand. I live in a bunkhouse. I can't take care of a baby. I'm not asking you to adopt her. I'm asking you to give her a name that isn't the baby, or that poor child, or whatever else people are going to start calling her. Colton was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Ridge Hollow was going about its business. He could hear wagons on the street, voices calling to each other, someone hammering something in the distance. Lily, he said finally. I was thinking Lily. Claire's expression softened, just a little, just for a second. Why Lily? My mother used to grow them. Back before... He didn't finish, didn't need to. Just seems like a good name. Lily Reeves, Clara said, testing it out. It fits. Doc Morrison made a note in his ledger. Lily Reeves it is, then. Now somebody needs to figure out what happens to her once she's strong enough to leave here. That was a problem for later, Colton figured. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting her through the next day, the next hour, the next minute. But Clara was already thinking ahead. She always was, Colton would learn later. Always 3 steps ahead while everyone else was still processing step 1. The blanket she was wrapped in, Clara said. Where is it? Colton pointed to a chair in the corner where he'd left it. Clara picked it up, started examining it in the light from the window. It was filthy, crusted with mud and what looked like blood in places, but the fabric underneath was good quality. Too good for someone who'd be abandoning a baby on train tracks. There's something here, Clara said. Her fingers found a pocket that had been sewn into the lining. Inside was a piece of jewelry, a necklace, silver chain with half a pendant attached. The pendant looked like it had been torn, leaving a jagged edge where the other half should have been. Colton stepped closer. There was an engraving on what remained of the pendant, a single letter, A, and tucked behind the necklace was a scrap of paper. Not like the note that had said Unwanted. This was different, part of a train ticket, torn but still readable. Denver to Ridge Hollow, November 18th, 5 days ago. Clara and Colton looked at each other. The same thought was forming in both their minds, though neither wanted to say it out loud yet. This wasn't just an abandoned baby. This was a secret someone had tried to bury. The rest of that day passed in a blur. Word spread through Ridge Hollow the way word always spread in small towns, fast and getting more dramatic with each retelling. By afternoon, half the town knew about the baby on the tracks. By evening, the other half knew and everyone had a theory. Some said it was a prostitute's child. Some said it was a ranch girl who got in trouble. Some said it was a runaway from Denver. Some said it was a widow who couldn't feed another mouth. Some said it was gypsies or Indians or railroad workers or a dozen other explanations that got wilder the more beer was involved. Clara ignored all of it. She'd moved into Doc Morrison's office sometime around mid-afternoon and showed no signs of leaving. She'd sent word to the school that she'd be absent the next day, had changed into a spare dress Mrs. Brennan brought over, and had set up camp in the corner chair with a pile of books and baby supplies. You're not planning to sleep here, Doc Morrison said around 8 o'clock. Someone should stay with her. I'm staying with her. It's my office. You need to sleep. You're not as young as you think you are. Doc's eyebrows went up. Neither are you, Miss Whitmore. I'm 26. You're 63. I'll take the night shift, you take the day shift. We'll both manage. Colton, who'd been sitting on the floor against the wall because all the chairs were taken, couldn't help a small smile. He'd heard about Clara Whitmore. Everyone in Ridge Hollow had heard about the school teacher who'd come from somewhere back east and proceeded to run the classroom with the kind of iron discipline that made grown men nervous. But hearing about her and watching her in action were two different things. What about you, Reeves? Doc turned his attention to Colton. You planning to set up permanent residence on my floor? Just want to make sure she's okay. She's okay for now. Go get some sleep. Come back tomorrow. Colton did, finally. Walked back to the bunkhouse at the Hendricks Ranch and collapsed on his cot without bothering to take his boots off. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. He dreamed about trains, about standing on the tracks with that bundle in his arms, about the headlight getting closer and closer, about not being able to move no matter how hard he tried, about opening the blanket and finding nothing inside but darkness and that one terrible word, unwanted. He woke up in the dark with his heart pounding and the taste of copper in his mouth. The bunkhouse was quiet around him, 6 other ranch hands sleeping, someone snoring, someone else muttering in their sleep. Colton lay there staring at the ceiling. Sleep wasn't coming back. Finally, he got up, pulled his boots on properly this time, and walked back into town. Doc Morrison's office had a lamp burning in the window. Colton stood outside for a minute, watching the shadow move inside. Then he knocked. Soft, so as not to wake anyone who might actually be sleeping. Clara opened the door. She didn't look surprised to see him. Can't sleep, Colton said. Neither can I. How is she? Better. Still weak, but better. Clara stepped aside. Come in. The office was warm. Doc must have built up the stove before he went to bed upstairs. Lily was in a makeshift crib, actually just a dresser drawer lined with blankets, sleeping fitly. Her color was better than it had been that morning, almost normal now. I've been thinking about this, Clara said. She held up the torn necklace, let it dangle in the lamplight. The letter A, the train ticket from Denver, the quality of the blanket. And I think whoever left her came from money. I think they came from Denver specifically, and I think the A stands for a name. Colton nodded slowly. He'd been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to voice it. A lot of names start with A. Not that many in Denver among families wealthy enough to take the train to Ridge Hollow, and expensive enough silver jewelry to tear in half and hide in a baby's blanket. You have someone in mind? Clara looked at him. Her eyes in the lamplight were dark and serious. I might. But if I'm right, if this baby belongs to who I think she might belong to, then whoever left her here wasn't just trying to hide a scandal. What do you mean? I mean, someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure this baby disappeared. And if we start asking questions, if we start digging into this... She trailed off. Set the necklace down on Doc's desk. We might find out things that powerful people don't want found out. So what are you saying? I'm saying we have to be careful. I'm saying this might be bigger and more dangerous than just a baby left on train tracks. Colton looked at Lily sleeping in her drawer crib. So small, so fragile, already at the center of something she didn't understand and hadn't asked for. She deserves to know where she came from, he said quietly. I agree, but we need to be smart about this. You think her mother's alive? I don't know. Maybe. The train ticket was from 5 days ago. If someone came from Denver with a newborn baby, if they left her on those tracks... Clara shook her head. Either the mother's dead, or she was forced to give the baby up. Those are the only 2 options that make sense. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, Ridge Hollow was dark and quiet. The only sound was the ticking of Doc's clock on the wall and Lily's soft breathing from the drawer. I'll help you, Colton said finally. Figure out where she came from, who she belongs to. Clara looked at him. Why? It was a fair question. Colton thought about it. Thought about that moment on the tracks, about pulling the blanket open and seeing that tiny face, about the word unwanted written in shaky pencil on a scrap of paper. Because somebody should, he said. Somebody should care what happens to her besides just keeping her alive. Something shifted in Clara's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. All right then, we'll do this together. Neither of them knew it yet, but that decision, made in a warm office in the middle of a cold night over a sleeping baby in a dresser drawer, was going to change everything. For Colton, for Clara, for Lily, and for the mother who was already searching for the child she'd been forced to leave behind. The trouble started 3 days later, though Colton didn't recognize it as trouble at first. He was carrying firewood into Doc Morrison's office when he noticed the two women standing across the street. They weren't doing anything obvious, just standing there, pretending to look at the window display at Henderson's general store. But their eyes kept drifting toward the Doc's place. One of them was Martha Hendricks, wife of the ranch owner Colton worked for. The other was Beatrice something or other, married to the banker. Clara noticed them too. She was at the window, changing Lily's cloth diaper on the examination table, and when she glanced up, her whole body went still. "They've been there for 10 minutes, she said quietly. Colton set the firewood down by the stove. So they're not here to shop, they're here to talk about us. Let them talk. Clara turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that made Colton realize he'd missed something important. You really don't understand how this works, do you? How what works? This. A single woman spending days alone with a single man, taking care of a baby that belongs to neither of them. She wrapped Lily in a clean blanket, picked her up. People are already making assumptions. What kind of assumptions? Clara's laugh was short and bitter. The kind that get me fired from teaching and you run out of town. Colton felt heat rising in his face. That's ridiculous. We're just helping. Doesn't matter what we're actually doing. Matters what it looks like. Clara sat down in the chair by the window, started trying to get Lily to take some more goat's milk from a rag soaked in it. The baby was getting better at feeding, but it was still a slow process. I knew this would happen. I just thought we'd have more time. The door opened and Doc Morrison came down from upstairs, still putting his coat on. He took one look at the women across the street, then at Clara's face, and sighed. How bad? Bad enough that they're not bothering to hide it anymore. Want me to go talk to them? And say what? That we're being perfectly proper. They'll just smile and nod and keep talking. Clara shifted Lily to her other arm. The damage is already done. Doc was quiet for a moment. Then he said, there might be another problem. Both Clara and Colton looked at him. County welfare officers coming through next week. Makes rounds every month or so, checking on situations like this. Abandoned children, that sort of thing. Doc pulled his spectacles off, started cleaning them on his shirt. When he gets here, he's going to want to know what we're planning to do with Lily. We tell him we're looking for her family, Colton said. And if we haven't found them by then? Silence. Outside, the two women had been joined by a third. All of them were staring at Doc's office now, not even pretending to be subtle about it. Clara spoke first, her voice steady, but Colton could hear the strain underneath. He'll take her to an orphanage. Probably. You said the Denver orphanage was full, Colton said. It is. So he'll take her to Wyoming or Kansas or wherever has room. Doc put his spectacles back on. Either way, she's gone. Lily made a small sound, something between a cry and a whimper. Clara adjusted her hold, started the gentle rocking motion she'd learned over the past few days. The baby quieted. Colton watched them, Clara's dark hair falling loose from its braid, Lily's tiny hand wrapped around Clara's finger, the lamplight making everything look warmer than it was. Something tight and uncomfortable was forming in his chest. There has to be another option, he said. There is. Doc Morrison's voice was carefully neutral. But you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway. You could get married. The words landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Clara's head snapped up. Colton felt his brain stutter. What? Married, Doc repeated. To each other. Create a legal family for the child. County welfare won't take a baby from a married couple unless there's abuse or neglect involved, and nobody could accuse either of you of that. That's insane, Clara said. It's practical. It's fraud. It's a legal marriage, same as any other. What happens behind closed doors is your business. Doc looked between them. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm saying it's an option if you want to keep the county from taking her. Colton's mind was racing. Marriage. To Clara Whitmore, a woman he'd known for all of 3 days. A woman who was sharp-tongued and stubborn, and probably too smart for her own good. A woman who was currently holding a baby that wasn't hers and looking at Doc Morrison like she was trying to decide whether to hit him or thank him. Even if we did that, Clara said slowly, it wouldn't solve the other problem. The town already thinks we're... She trailed off, glanced at Colton, then away. People are going to talk either way. Let them, Colton said. The words came out before he'd thought them through, but once they were out, he found he meant them. I don't care what Martha Hendricks or Beatrice, whoever thinks about me. Never have. You're a man. You don't have to care. Clara's voice had an edge now. I'm a school teacher, or I was. My reputation is all I have. Then marry me and make it legitimate. The silence that followed was profound. Clara stared at him. Doc Morrison looked like he was trying very hard not to smile. You can't be serious, Clara said finally. Why not? Because we don't know each other. Because marriage isn't something you just do on a whim to solve a practical problem. Because this is crazy. Crazier than letting the county take her away? Clara opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at Lily, who was sleeping now, her tiny face peaceful in a way that made Colton's chest ache. I need to think, Clara said. Fair enough. Doc Morrison cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think you'd both be better at raising a child than half the actually married couples in this town. But it's your decision. He grabbed his medical bag from the desk. I've got house calls to make. Try not to burn the place down while I'm gone. After he left, Colton and Clara sat in uncomfortable silence. Outside, the group of women across the street had grown to 5. Colton could see them talking, heads bent together, occasionally glancing toward the window. I meant what I said, he told Clara, about not caring what they think. I know you did. That's part of the problem. How is that a problem? Clara looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression. Because you're willing to tie yourself to a woman you barely know, take on a child that isn't yours, deal with all the gossip and judgment that comes with it, and you're acting like it's nothing. Like it's just another chore, like fixing a fence or shoeing a horse. I don't think it's nothing. Then what do you think it is? Colton was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Lily sleeping in Clara's arms, at the silver necklace still sitting on Doc's desk, at the women outside who had nothing better to do than make other people's lives harder. I think it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Maybe the only right thing in this whole mess. Clara's eyes were bright. For a second, Colton thought she might cry, but she didn't, just took a deep breath and nodded. I need some air. Can you watch her? Yeah, of course. Clara stood, transferred Lily to Colton's arms with a gentleness that made something catch in his throat. The baby barely stirred. Colton sat down in the chair Clara had vacated, Lily warm and small against his chest. Clara grabbed her shawl and went to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. I'm not saying yes, she said without turning around, but I'm not saying no either. Then she was gone, slipping out into the cold afternoon. Through the window, Colton watched her walk past the cluster of gossiping women without acknowledging them. Her back was straight, her head high. Whatever they said to her, and he saw at least 2 of them try, she ignored completely. Lily shifted in Colton's arms, made a small sound. He looked down at her. Her eyes were open now, unfocused but looking in his general direction. Her little hand had worked free of the blanket and was waving around in the air like she was trying to grab onto something. You're causing all kinds of trouble, Colton told her quietly. You know that? Lily blinked at him. Her hand kept waving. I don't know what I'm doing here, he continued. Never thought I'd be sitting in a doctor's office holding a baby and thinking about getting married to a woman I met 3 days ago. But here we are. The baby made another sound. Not quite a cry, more like she was testing out her voice. Your mama's out there somewhere, Colton said. Maybe. We're going to find her if we can, but until then, he trailed off. Wasn't sure how to finish that sentence. The door opened and Clara came back in. Her cheeks were red from the cold and something else, maybe anger. She unwrapped her shawl and hung it back on the hook. They said I should be ashamed of myself, she announced. Martha Hendricks actually said that, to my face. What'd you say back? Nothing. What could I say that wouldn't make it worse? Clara sat down heavily in the other chair. Beatrice asked if the baby was mine, if that's why you and I were playing house. Colton felt heat rising in his face again. That's ridiculous, I know, but that's what they think. That's what the whole town is going to think, if we keep this up. Clara looked at him. The county officer comes next Thursday. That's 6 days. You want to know my answer by then. I want to know if there's any point in trying to keep her at all. It wasn't really a question, but Colton answered anyway. There's a point. Even if it means getting married to a stranger, you're not really a stranger anymore. 3 days, Colton. We've known each other for 3 days. Some people know each other for years and still don't know each other at all. He stood up, careful not to jostle Lily. Look, I'm not going to pretend this is normal. It's not. But nothing about this situation is normal. We're already doing something most people wouldn't do. Might as well go all the way. Clara laughed. It was a tired sound. That's your proposal? Might as well go all the way? I'm a ranch hand, not a poet. Clearly. But there was something softer in her voice now. She stood up, moved closer, looked down at Lily in Colton's arms. She's getting stronger. Yeah. When I first saw her, I thought... Clara stopped, swallowed hard. I thought we'd be burying her by now. But we're not. No, we're not. Clara reached out, touched Lily's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around Clara's index finger and held on. I had a sister once. She died when she was 2. Fever took her. I was 8. Colton didn't say anything. Let Clara talk. My mother never really recovered. She was there, but she wasn't there, you know? Like part of her died with my sister and the rest was just going through the motions. Clara's voice was quiet. When I saw Lily that first morning, when Doc told me what had happened, all I could think was that somewhere out there, someone had lost a baby, whether they knew it yet or not. Maybe they wanted to lose her, Colton said. Maybe, but I don't think so. Not really. Clara looked up at him. That necklace, the ticket, the quality of the blanket. Someone cared enough to wrap her in something good. Someone cared enough to leave a way to trace where she came from, even if it was hidden. Or someone wanted to make sure if she was found, people would know she came from money. Clara nodded slowly. That too. Either way, I think her mother didn't have a choice. I think someone made that choice for her. You got a plan for finding out? Working on it. Clara gently extracted her finger from Lily's grip. There's a woman who works at the telegraph office. She's from Denver originally, keeps up with all the society news there, loves to gossip about the wealthy families. If something happened to a rich family's daughter in the last year, she'll know about it. That your next stop? Soon as I can get away without those hens outside following me. Clara moved to the window, looked out. They're still there. Don't they have homes to go to? Apparently watching us is more interesting. Lucky us. Clara turned back to Colton. About your proposal, or whatever that was. I need to think about it properly, not just react. This is too important. Take whatever time you need. I have 6 days. Then take 6 days. Clara studied his face for a long moment. Why are you really doing this? Doing what? All of it. You could have ridden away that morning, could have left her at Doc's and never come back, could have let me handle this alone. But you didn't. Why? Colton thought about that. About the moment on the tracks, about opening that blanket and seeing that tiny face, about the word unwanted written in shaky pencil, about his own childhood, about the father who drank himself to death, about the mother who tried her best but died tired and broken before she was 40, about spending his whole life feeling like he didn't quite fit anywhere, didn't quite belong. Because nobody else was going to, he said, finally. It was the simplest truth he had, and maybe the only one that mattered. Claire's expression did something complicated. Then she nodded. Okay. Okay, what? Okay, that's a good enough reason. She took Lily from Colton's arms, settled the baby against her shoulder. I'm going to the telegraph office. You should go back to the ranch before your boss starts wondering where you've been for 3 days. Colton had actually forgotten about the ranch, about his job, about the bunkhouse, about everything that had been his normal life before a freezing dawn and a bundle on the tracks. Right, yeah. Come back tomorrow? You want me to? Clara looked at him over Lily's head. I think we should probably see each other at least once more before deciding whether to get married. Just seems practical. There was something that might have been humor in her voice. Colton couldn't quite tell. Tomorrow then, he said. He left before he could second-guess himself. Outside, the group of women had finally dispersed, but he could feel eyes on him from various windows as he walked to where he'd left Rusty tied up behind the general store. The horse looked at him reproachfully, like he knew he'd been forgotten. "Don't start," Colton muttered, untying the reins. "Carson." The ride back to the Hendricks Ranch took 40 minutes. By the time Colton got there, the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping fast. He took care of Rusty first, unsaddled him, brushed him down, made sure he had feed and water, then headed to the bunkhouse. He was intercepted halfway across the yard by Tom Hendricks himself. The ranch owner was a big man, barrel-chested and gray-haired, with a face that had seen too much sun and too many hard winters. "Reeves," Colton stopped. "Mr. Hendricks?" "Been looking for you. Where you been?" "In town. Had something I needed to take care of." "That something involve a baby?" Word traveled even faster than Colton had thought. "Yeah." Hendricks was quiet for a moment. The silence stretched out uncomfortable and cold. "My wife's been talking. Says you and that school teacher are getting awful close over this abandoned child business. We're trying to help. That what they're calling it now?" Hendricks spat into the dirt. "Look, I don't care what you do on your own time, but you got a job here, Reeves. Got responsibilities. Can't have you running off to play house every time that woman snaps her fingers." Something hot and angry flared in Colton's chest. Didn't realize taking care of a baby that almost got killed by a train was playing house. Watch your tone. Watch yours. They stared at each other. Colton knew he was crossing a line, knew he was probably about to get fired, didn't particularly care. Behind Hendricks, the bunkhouse door had opened and a couple of the other ranch hands were watching with interest. Finally, Hendricks shook his head. "You're one of my best workers, Reeves. Don't want to lose you over some fool mistake. It's not a mistake." "Then what is it?" "The right thing to do." Hendricks snorted. "Right thing? You sound like a preacher." He turned to walk away, stopped, looked back. "My wife wants you gone. Said you're a bad influence or some such nonsense. I told her I'd handle it, so I'm handling it." "Meaning what?" "Meaning you got a choice. You can keep your job and your place in the bunkhouse, but you stay away from that child and that school teacher. Or you can keep playing hero in town, but you find somewhere else to work and sleep." Hendricks crossed his arms. "What's it going to be?" Colton didn't even have to think about it. "Guess I'll be moving out." "You're serious? Dead serious? Over a baby that's not even yours?" "Yeah." Hendricks stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You've lost your damn mind." "Probably." Colton headed toward the bunkhouse. "I'll be out by morning." "Reeves, thanks for the work, Mr. Hendricks. Tell your wife she got her wish." Inside the bunkhouse, the other ranch hands were trying to pretend they hadn't been listening at the door. Colton ignored them, started gathering his things. He didn't have much. A change of clothes, a razor, a few books, the pocket watch his father had left him. Everything fit in one saddlebag. "You really leaving?" asked Pete, one of the younger hands. "Looks that way." "Over some baby?" Colton looked at him. "You got a problem with that?" Pete held up his hands. "No problem. Just seems crazy is all." "Yeah, well, crazy seems to be where I'm living these days." He finished packing, rolled up his bedding, took one last look around the bunkhouse that had been home for the better part of 2 years. Felt nothing. That was the truth of it. He felt nothing about leaving. No regret, no second thoughts. Maybe that should have worried him more than it did. He slept that night on the floor of Doc Morrison's office, using his saddle as a pillow. Claire had gone back to the boarding house to sleep but had left instructions for feeding Lily if she woke. She woke twice. Colton handled it both times, heating goat's milk on the stove, soaking a clean rag, letting the baby suck the liquid from the cloth. The second time, around 3 in the morning, he sat in the chair by the window and just watched her. Watched the way her little chest rose and fell, the way her hands opened and closed while she slept, the way she'd started responding to voices and touch. "I don't know what I'm doing," he told her quietly. "Your mama's out there somewhere. We're going to find her. But what if she doesn't want you? What if she really did mean to leave you on those tracks?" Lily slept on, oblivious. "Clara thinks someone forced her hand. Maybe she's right. Hope she's right anyway." Colton shifted the baby to his other arm. "Thing is, even if we find your mama, even if she wants you back, the county's not going to just hand you over. Not without proof. Not without a whole lot of questions." Outside Ridge Hollow was dark and silent. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere else, wind rattled a loose shutter. So I guess what I'm saying is, you might be stuck with me and Clara for a while, whether any of us planned on it or not. The baby sighed in her sleep. A soft sound, almost content. Colton closed his eyes, leaned his head back against the chair. Tomorrow he'd need to find work, need to find a place to live, need to figure out how to survive while taking care of a baby that wasn't his and maybe marrying a woman he barely knew. Tomorrow. But right now, in this quiet moment before dawn, it was enough just to sit here, to hold this small life in his arms and know that she was safe, that she was warm, that she was wanted, even if the whole world had decided she wasn't. Morning came too fast and brought Clara with it. She arrived just after sunrise with news that made Colton's stomach sink. The school board met last night, she said without preamble. She was still wearing her coat, hadn't even bothered to unwrap her shawl. They've decided to terminate my position. On what grounds? Conduct unbecoming a teacher, specifically spending unchaperoned time with a man while caring for a child of questionable origin. Clara's voice was flat, emotionless. They were very polite about it, very sorry, very firm. That's garbage. That's Ridge Hollow. Clara finally took her coat off, hung it on the hook. So now we're both unemployed. This partnership is working out great so far. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew it was coming. Clara moved to where Lily was sleeping, touched the baby's forehead gently. Mrs. Brennan says I can stay at the boarding house until the end of the month. After that, I'll need to find somewhere else to go. The county officer comes Thursday. I know. They looked at each other across the small room. The morning light coming through the window was thin and cold. So what do we do? Colton asked. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, met his eyes directly. We get married. Tomorrow, if we can find someone to do it. We petition the county to let us keep Lily as our ward until her real family can be found. And we figure out the rest as we go. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Clara moved closer, stuck out her hand. So what do you say, Colton Reeves? Want to make this disaster official? Colton looked at her hand, at her face, at the determination there mixed with fear and something that might have been hope. He thought about everything that was going to come next, all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons this was probably the worst decision either of them had ever made. Then he took her hand and shook it. Why the hell not? He said. And that was how Colton Reeves and Clara Whitmore got engaged to be married. Not with romance or flowers or bended knees, but with a handshake in a doctor's office over a baby that wasn't theirs, while their whole lives fell apart around them. It wasn't the beginning either of them had imagined, but it was the beginning they had. They got married on a Tuesday morning in the Ridge Hollow courthouse, with Doc Morrison as witness and a judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The whole ceremony took less than 10 minutes. Clara wore the same dress she'd been wearing for 3 days. Colton wore his only clean shirt. Neither of them had rings. You may kiss the bride, the judge said in a tone that suggested he didn't particularly care whether they did or not. Colton and Clara looked at each other. The moment stretched out awkward and strange. Finally, Clara stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and businesslike. Congratulations, the judge said without enthusiasm. That'll be $2 for the license. Colton paid. They signed the papers. Just like that, they were married. Walking back to Doc Morrison's office, Clara said, "That was possibly the least romantic thing I've ever experienced. You been to a lot of weddings?" "A few. They usually involve more than 4 people and at least one person who's happy about it." Doc seemed happy. "Doc's been drinking since breakfast." Clara pulled her shawl tighter against the cold. It was early December now, and the temperature kept dropping. "We need to talk about what happens next." "I know." "The county officer comes tomorrow. We need a plan." "Thought the plan was to tell him we're married and keeping Lily. That's part of it. But we also need somewhere to live that isn't Doc's office floor." Clara stopped walking, turned to face him. "I've been thinking about the old Hutchins place." Colton knew the property she meant. Everyone in Ridge Hollow knew it. 40 acres of scrubland about 3 miles outside town, with a half-finished homestead that had been abandoned 2 years ago when the owner died of cholera. The land was available for claim if anyone wanted to brave the isolation and finish what Hutchins had started. "That place is barely standing," Colton said. "But it's standing. and it's available, and we need somewhere the county officer can see we're actually trying to build a life. Clara started walking again. I already talked to the land office. They'll give us the claim if we agree to improve the property within 6 months. Clara, it's December, middle of winter. That homestead doesn't have glass in the windows or a proper roof. So we fix it. With what money? Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I have some savings. Not much, but enough to buy supplies. And you know how to work with your hands. I'm a ranch hand, not a carpenter. You'll learn. She looked at him. Unless you have a better idea. Colton didn't. That was the problem. They needed somewhere to live, needed to show the county they could provide for Lily, and they needed it fast. The Hutchins place was far from ideal, but it was available and it was free. When do we move? He asked. Tomorrow, after the county officer leaves. Clara's jaw was set in that stubborn line Colton was starting to recognize. We'll take whatever we can carry, fix up what we can before the worst of winter hits, and figure out the rest later. Back at Doc's office, Lily was awake and fussing. Clara picked her up, started that gentle rocking motion that seemed to calm the baby. Colton watched them, feeling that strange tightness in his chest again. There's something else we need to talk about, Clara said without looking at him. What? The necklace. The train ticket. Finding out where Lily really came from. She shifted the baby to her other shoulder. I went to see Margaret at the telegraph office yesterday. And she knew exactly what I was talking about the minute I mentioned a wealthy Denver family with a daughter whose name starts with A. Clara finally looked at Colton. Adeline Beaumont, daughter of Marcus Beaumont, who owns about half the cattle ranches between Denver and Kansas City. The name meant nothing to Colton, but the way Clara said it made it clear it should have. Never heard of him. You wouldn't have. He doesn't operate this far west, but in Denver, the Beaumonts are practically royalty. Old money, political connections, the whole thing. Clara sat down, adjusted Lily in her arms. According to Margaret, Adeline Beaumont disappeared from Denver society about 8 months ago. The official story was that she'd gone to stay with relatives in Boston for her health. But that's not what really happened. Margaret doesn't think so. She has a cousin who works as a maid in one of the big Denver houses, and the gossip among the staff was that Adeline was pregnant. Got involved with someone her father didn't approve of, a railroad worker, according to the rumors. And when Marcus Beaumont found out, he sent her away to have the baby in secret. Colton felt something cold settle in his stomach. And then what? Then nothing. The baby supposedly died during birth. Adeline came back to Denver 2 months ago, wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't see anyone. Been locked away in the Beaumont house ever since. But the baby didn't die. No. Clara looked down at Lily. The baby ended up on railroad tracks outside Ridge Hollow, wrapped in an expensive blanket with half of what was probably Adeline's necklace hidden in the lining. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Ridge Hollow was going about its business. Wagons rattled past. Someone was shouting about the price of feed. Life continuing like it always did, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in its corners. So what do we do with this information? Colton asked finally. I don't know yet. Clara's voice was quiet. If Marcus Beaumont wanted his grandchild dead, if he's the one who had Lily left on those tracks, then going to him directly would be dangerous, for us and for Lily. But Adeline might not know her baby survived, or she might know and be searching. Either way, we can't just sit on this. Clara stood up, started pacing the small room with Lily still in her arms. We need more information before we do anything. Need to know for sure that Adeline is Lily's mother. Need to know what actually happened. Need to... She stopped mid-sentence. Her whole body went rigid. What? Colton asked. Clara moved to the window, looked out. There's a man across the street, just standing there watching this building. Colton joined her at the window. Sure enough, there was a man standing in the shadows between the general store and the feed shop. He was dressed in dark clothes, hat pulled low, and he was definitely watching Doc's office. As they watched, the man seemed to realize he'd been spotted. He turned and walked away quickly, disappearing around the corner. You recognize him? Clara asked. No, you? Never seen him before. Clara's voice was tight. Could be nothing. Could be someone just curious about the baby everyone's talking about. Or it could be someone checking to see if she's still here. They looked at each other. The same thought was clearly running through both their minds. "We need to be careful," Clara said. "If the Beaumonts know Lily's alive, if they know we have her, then we're in trouble. Big trouble." The county welfare officer arrived the next morning at exactly 10 o'clock. His name was Bernard Pritchard, and he looked like a man who'd never had an original thought in his life. Everything about him was gray suit, gray hair, gray mustache, gray expression. He walked around Doc's office making notes on a clipboard, asking questions in a monotone voice that suggested he'd asked the same questions 1,000 times before. "And you are the child's legal guardians?" "We're married," Clara said, holding up her left hand to show the thin gold band Colton had bought that morning from the general store. It had cost him almost all the money he had left. "As of yesterday." Pritchard made a note. "Rather sudden, wasn't it?" "We've known each other for years," Clara lied smoothly. "The baby brought us back together." More notes. "And you have adequate accommodations for raising a child?" "We're moving to the Hutchins homestead today," Colton said. 40 acres. House needs work, but it's structurally sound. I'll need to inspect it." "Of course. We can take you out there now if you'd like." Pritchard looked at his pocket watch. "I have other appointments. I'll return in 1 week to inspect your living situation. If I find it unsuitable, the child will be removed to the state orphanage in Cheyenne." "We understand," Clara said. After Pritchard left, Colton let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. 1 week. 1 week to turn a wreck into something livable. Clara looked down at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully through all the drama. No pressure. They loaded everything they owned into a borrowed wagon that afternoon. It wasn't much. Clara's trunk of clothes and books, Colton's saddlebag, supplies Doc Morrison had given them, and enough food to last maybe a week if they were careful. Lily rode in a basket lined with blankets, sleeping through most of the 3-mile journey. The Hutchins homestead looked worse than Colton remembered. The main structure was there, 4 walls, a roof frame, a stone fireplace. But that was about it. No glass in the windows, just empty frames. Half the roof was open to the sky. The door hung crooked on broken hinges. The inside was full of debris, animal droppings, and 2 years of weather damage. Clara stood in the doorway, Lily in her arms, and Colton watched her face carefully, waiting for the moment when she'd realize what they'd gotten themselves into, when she'd turn around and say this was impossible. Instead, she said, "Well, I've seen worse." "Where?" "I'm lying. This is definitely the worst." She stepped inside anyway, picking her way carefully over the debris. "But it's ours. That counts for something." They spent the rest of the daylight hours doing what they could. Colton cleared the debris, swept out the worst of the dirt, got the door rehung properly. Clara scrubbed the floor until her hands were raw, hung blankets over the window frames to keep out the wind, got a fire going in the fireplace that filled the room with smoke until Colton climbed up and cleared a bird's nest out of the chimney. By the time night fell, they had one room that was almost livable. The fire was drawing properly. Clara had set up a sleeping area in the corner with all their blankets, and Lily was fed and sleeping in her basket. They ate a cold dinner of bread and cheese, sitting on the floor near the fire because they didn't have furniture yet. Neither of them talked much. They were both too tired. "I'll sleep by the door," Colton said finally. "You and Lily take the corner." Clara looked at him. "This is going to be our life now. Sharing one room, taking care of a baby, trying to survive on land that's barely farmable. You understand that?" "Yeah." "And you're still okay with it?" Colton thought about the bunkhouse at the Hendricks Ranch, thought about the years of drifting from one job to another, never staying anywhere long, never building anything permanent. Thought about the emptiness of it. "I'm okay with it," he said. Clara nodded slowly. "Good. Because I'm terrified, and I need you to not be." It was the first time she'd admitted to being scared. Colton found it strangely comforting, knowing he wasn't the only one. They fell asleep to the sound of wind howling through the gaps in the walls and Lily making small sounds in her sleep. Colton lay awake longer than he probably should have, watching the fire burn down to embers, listening to Clara's breathing even out, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The next week was brutal. Colton worked from dawn until dark trying to make the homestead livable. He patched the roof with boards salvaged from an old shed, covered the gaps with tar paper he bought on credit from the general store. He built shutters for the windows since glass was too expensive. He reinforced the walls, fixed the chimney properly, started work on a second room that could serve as a bedroom once winter passed. Clara took care of Lily and everything else. She cooked over the fireplace, washed clothes in a bucket of melted snow, kept the fire going, made trips into town for supplies they couldn't afford. She never complained, never said this was too hard, never suggested giving up. But Colton could see it wearing on her. The way her hand shook sometimes when she thought no one was looking. The way she'd stand at the window staring out at nothing, her face drawn and tired. The way she'd hold Lily just a little too tight, like she was afraid someone would take the baby away if she loosened her grip for even a second. They didn't talk about being married, didn't talk about what that meant beyond the legal protection it gave them. They were polite to each other, careful, like two strangers sharing a house because they had no other choice, which Colton supposed was pretty much what they were. On the 5th day, Clara came back from town with news that made Colton's blood run cold. "There was another man watching me," she said, "different from the first one. This one followed me from the general store almost to the edge of town before turning back." "You sure he was following you?" "I'm sure. And Mrs. Henderson at the store said someone came in yesterday asking questions about us, about the baby, where we were living, how long we'd had her, where she came from." Colton set down the hammer he'd been using. "What did Mrs. Henderson tell them?" "Nothing," she says. "But Colton, if the Beaumonts are sending people to check on Lily, if they know where we are, then we need to be ready." Colton looked around the homestead. It wasn't much, but it was defendable. One main entrance, thick walls, a fireplace they could cook on without going outside. "We'll take shifts at night, one of us awake at all times." "You think it'll come to that?" "I think we can't afford to assume it won't." That night, Colton sat by the window with his rifle across his knees while Clara and Lily slept. The moon was nearly full, turning the snow-covered ground outside silver and strange. He watched the tree line, watched the shadows, watched for any movement that didn't belong. Around midnight, he saw it. A figure on horseback, moving slowly along the ridge above the homestead. Too far away to make out details, but close enough to be watching. Colton didn't move, didn't call out, just watched the figure watch them. After about 10 minutes, the rider turned and disappeared back into the darkness. Colton waited another hour before waking Clara to take her shift. He didn't tell her about the rider. She had enough to worry about. County Officer Pritchard returned exactly 1 week after his first visit. He spent an hour walking around the homestead, making notes, asking questions. He checked the fireplace, the walls, the food supplies. He watched Clara feed Lily, watched how they interacted with the baby, watched everything with those cold gray eyes. Finally, he said, "This is adequate, barely. I'll return in 1 month to reassess." After he left, Clara sagged against the wall. "We did it. For now. For now is all we've got." She looked at Lily, who was awake and looking around with those unfocused baby eyes. 1 month. Then we have to do this all over again." "We'll manage." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You keep saying that. Like if you say it enough times, it'll be true." "Maybe it will be. Or maybe we're just delaying the inevitable." Clara picked up Lily, held her close. "We can't hide forever, Colton. If Adeline Beaumont is looking for her daughter, if Marcus Beaumont wants to make sure no one ever finds out about his grandchild, eventually they're going to come here. And when they do..." She was interrupted by a sound outside. Horse hooves on frozen ground, coming fast. Colton grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. A rider was approaching the homestead at a gallop, barely staying in the saddle. As they got closer, Colton could see it was a woman. Dark hair flying loose, coat flapping open, face pale even from a distance. The horse stumbled and the woman fell, hitting the ground hard about 20 yards from the house. The horse kept going, disappearing into the trees. "Stay here," Colton told Clara. He went outside, rifle ready, not sure what he was walking into. The woman was trying to get up and failing. She managed to get to her hands and knees before collapsing again. Colton approached carefully, rifle still raised. "Please," the woman said. Her voice was raw, desperate. "Please, I need help." Colton got close enough to see her properly. She was young, maybe Clara's age. Expensive clothes under the mud and dirt, a face that might have been beautiful if it wasn't twisted with exhaustion and pain. And around her neck, on a silver chain, was half a pendant. Torn jagged on one side, engraved with a single letter. A. Colton's heart stopped. "Who are you?" he asked, though he already knew. The woman looked up at him with eyes that were the same shape as Lily's, the same shade of blue. "My name is Adeline Beaumont," she said, "and I'm looking for my daughter." Behind Colton, the door to the homestead opened. Clara stood there with Lily in her arms. For one long moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Adeline Beaumont saw the baby, and something in her face broke. She made a sound that wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob, and tried to get to her feet again. "That's her," Adeline said. "That's my baby. I know it is. Please, please tell me that's my baby." Clara looked at Colton. Colton looked at Clara. Lily made a small sound, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over all their heads. "You better come inside," Clara said finally, "before you freeze to death." Getting Adeline into the house was harder than it should have been. She could barely walk, kept stumbling, kept trying to reach for Lily. Clara had to back away to keep the baby out of reach, which made Adeline cry harder. Finally, they got her settled on the floor by the fire. She was shaking violently. Whether from cold or emotion or both, Colton couldn't tell. Clara handed Lily to Colton and grabbed blankets, started wrapping them around Adeline. "When's the last time you ate?" Clara asked. "I don't know. Yesterday? The day before?" Adeline couldn't take her eyes off Lily. "Is she healthy? Is she okay? Please tell me she's okay." "She's fine," Colton said. "We've been taking care of her." "How long have you had her?" "About 2 weeks." Adeline started crying again. 2 weeks. "I've been searching for 2 months, and she's been here for 2 weeks." Clara brought water, made Adeline drink it. Brought bread, made her eat. Adeline did both mechanically, like she was following instructions without really understanding why. "How did you find us?" Clara asked. "I didn't. I've been riding through every town between here and Denver, asking about abandoned babies, about anyone who might have found a child." Adeline's voice was hoarse. "I was just passing through Ridge Hollow when I heard about a couple with a baby. I had to check. I had to know." "And your father?" Colton asked. "Does he know you're here?" Something changed in Adeline's face. Fear, maybe. Or hatred. Possibly both. "My father thinks I'm locked in my room in Denver. He doesn't know I escaped. Doesn't know I've been looking. Why would he want to stop you?" Adeline laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "Because he's the one who took her. He's the one who ordered his men to get rid of her." The words hung in the air like smoke. Claire's face had gone pale. Colton felt his hands tighten on the rifle he was still holding. "Explain," Clara said. So Adeline did. The whole story came out in broken pieces, interrupted by crying and long silences. She told them about falling in love with a railroad worker named James, about getting pregnant, about her father finding out and sending her away to have the baby in secret, about giving birth in a cabin outside Denver with only a midwife present, about hearing her daughter cry, about holding her for maybe 5 minutes before her father's men came and took the baby away. "They told me she died," Adeline said. "Said she was too weak, didn't survive the night. Made me sign papers saying I understood, saying I wouldn't speak of it again." She wiped at her face with shaking hands. "But I didn't believe them. A mother knows. And when I got back to Denver, when I heard one of the ranch hands talking about how he couldn't do it, how he left the baby on the railroad tracks instead of... She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. "You tore your necklace," Clara said quietly. "Put half of it with the baby." Adeline nodded. "I had to. In case someone found her, in case there was a chance." She looked at Clara with desperate eyes. "You found her. You saved her. How? How did you—" "I didn't," Clara said. "He did." She nodded toward Colton. Adeline turned to Colton. "You found my baby?" "On the railroad tracks, about 10 seconds before a freight train came through." Colton shifted Lily in his arms. The baby was awake now, looking around with those unfocused eyes. "Thought she was dead at first, but she fought, kept fighting." "Like her mother," Adeline said softly, then louder. "Can I hold her? Please. Can I just hold her?" Clara and Colton looked at each other, having a conversation without words, weighing risks, trying to figure out the right thing to do. Finally, Colton crossed the room and handed Lily to Adeline. The moment Adeline had her daughter in her arms, she broke completely. She held Lily against her chest and sobbed, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from somewhere past words. Lily, startled by the noise and the strange arms, started crying too. Clara knelt down next to them, put a hand on Adeline's shoulder. "She's okay, you're okay. You're both okay now." But even as she said it, Colton knew it wasn't true. They weren't okay. None of them were. Because somewhere out there, Marcus Beaumont was realizing his daughter had escaped, was probably already sending men to find her. And when they came, they wouldn't be asking nicely. Adeline didn't let go of Lily for almost an hour. She just sat there on the floor by the fire, holding her daughter, whispering things that Colton and Clara couldn't hear and probably weren't meant to. The baby had stopped crying after a few minutes, seeming to sense something familiar in the arms that held her, in the heartbeat she was pressed against. Clara made coffee. It was weak. They were running low on supplies. But it was hot, and Adeline drank it like she was drowning, and it was air. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the cup. "How long until your father realizes you're gone?" Colton asked. He was standing by the window, rifle in hand, watching the darkening landscape outside. The sun was setting fast and the temperature was dropping with it. "He already knows." Adeline's voice was flat. "I've been gone 3 days. He'll have sent men after me, probably sent them the moment he discovered my room was empty." "And they'll come here?" "Eventually. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but yes, they'll come." Adeline looked up at him, and there was something broken in her eyes. "My father doesn't leave loose ends. He spent too much time building his reputation, his empire. A bastard grandchild, a daughter who defied him. These are things that destroy men like him. He won't let that happen." Clara sat down next to Adeline. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying he'll kill me if he has to. He'll definitely kill her." Adeline's arms tightened around Lily. "And he'll make sure no one ever knows what really happened. That's what powerful men do. They erase their mistakes." The room went quiet except for the crackling of the fire. Outside, the wind was picking up. Colton could hear it whistling through the gaps in the walls they hadn't managed to seal yet. "Then you can't go back," Clara said. "I know. And you can't take Lily to Denver." "I know that too." Adeline looked at her daughter, touched the baby's tiny hand. Lily's fingers wrapped around Adeline's index finger and held on. "I don't have anywhere to go. No money, no friends who'd risk my father's anger by helping me. I rode out here on a stolen horse with nothing but the clothes I'm wearing and half a necklace." "The horse ran off," Colton said. Adeline laughed, and it was almost hysterical. "Of course it did. Perfect." Clara stood up, started pacing. Colton recognized the look on her face. She was thinking, working through problems, trying to find solutions where none seemed to exist. "How many men would your father send?" "At least 4, maybe more." "Armed?" "Definitely. And they know you're looking for the baby. So they'll be checking every town, every homestead, asking the same questions you've been asking." Clara stopped pacing, looked at Colton. "We don't have much time." "Time for what?" "To decide what we're going to do when they get here. Because they will get here, and when they do, we need a plan." Adeline was shaking her head. "You don't understand. These aren't ranch hands or hired thugs. These are my father's personal men. They've been with him for years. They're loyal, they're dangerous, and they won't hesitate to do whatever he's ordered them to do." "So what are you suggesting?" Colton asked. "We just hand over the baby when they show up?" "No. I'm suggesting you leave, both of you. Take Lily somewhere far away where my father can't find her, and leave me here to tell them I never found her." "They won't believe you." "They might." "They won't," Clara said firmly. "And even if they did, what then? They take you back to Denver, lock you up somewhere even more secure, and you never see your daughter again anyway." Adeline didn't have an answer for that. She just held Lily tighter. Colton moved away from the window, sat down on the floor across from the two women. "Here's what I think. We're not giving up Lily, we're not running, and we're not letting them take Adeline." "So what do we do?" Clara asked. "We fight." The word hung there. Clara and Adeline both stared at him. "Fight," Clara repeated slowly. "Against 4 or more armed men sent by one of the wealthiest cattle barons in Colorado." "You have a better idea?" "I have several ideas that don't involve getting killed." "I'm open to hearing them." Clara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, she said, "I don't actually have any ideas." "Then we fight." Colton looked at Adeline. "How much time do you think we have?" "A day." Maybe 2 if we're lucky. Adeline shifted Lily in her arms. The baby was sleeping now, exhausted from all the emotion. They'll check Ridge Hollow first, ask questions, follow the trail here. Once they know about you two and the baby, it won't take long to find this place. So we have 1 day to prepare. Colton stood up, started taking inventory in his head. They had his rifle, a shotgun that had belonged to Old Man Hutchins and was probably older than Colton himself, a revolver Clara had bought in town last week when things started getting strange. Not much ammunition for any of them. The homestead had thick walls and limited entry points, which was good, but the windows had no glass, just shutters, which meant anyone outside could shoot in if they wanted to. This is insane, Clara said. We should go to the sheriff, get help from the town. The sheriff's not going to stand up to Marcus Beaumont, Adeline said quietly. No one will. My father has too much influence, too much money. Anyone who tries to help us will end up destroyed. I've seen him do it before. Then we're on our own. Colton looked at Clara. You know how to shoot? I can point a gun and pull a trigger if that's what you're asking. It'll have to be enough. He turned to Adeline. What about you? I grew up on a ranch. I can shoot. Good. Colton started moving toward the door. I need to reinforce the shutters. Maybe build some kind of barricade for the door. Clara, we need more ammunition if you can get it. And food, water, medical supplies. Anything we'd need if we're stuck here for a while. You really think it'll come to that? Clara asked. A siege? I think we need to be ready for anything. Clara grabbed her coat and shawl. I'll go to town now before it gets full dark. Make up some excuse about needing supplies for the baby. Take the wagon. And Clara? Colton waited until she looked at him. Be careful. If Beaumont's men are already in Ridge Hollow, they'll be watching for anyone connected to us. I'll be careful. After Clara left, Colton and Adeline sat in awkward silence. Lily was still sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling in that way that made something ache in Colton's chest every time he watched it. Adeline hadn't let go of her yet. Why are you doing this? Adeline asked finally. Colton was working on reinforcing one of the window shutters. He didn't stop, didn't look at her. Doing what? Risking your life for a baby that isn't yours, for a woman you just met, against men who'll kill you without hesitation. Adeline's voice was quiet. No one does that. No one is that selfless. I'm not selfless. Then what are you? Colton thought about that. About the moment on the tracks, about the word unwanted scrawled on that piece of paper, about every time in his own life he'd felt like he didn't belong anywhere, didn't matter to anyone. Stubborn, he said finally, just too stubborn to let bad things happen when I can do something about it. That's going to get you killed. Probably. Colton finished with the shutter, moved to the next window. But at least I'll go down fighting for something that matters. Adeline was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Thank you. For finding her. For taking care of her. For not just leaving her on those tracks. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't have. Adeline looked down at Lily. Most people would have kept riding, would have convinced themselves they didn't hear anything, didn't see anything, would have chosen their own safety over a stranger's baby. Colton didn't have an answer for that. Maybe she was right. Maybe most people would have ridden past. He didn't like to think about it. Can I ask you something? Adeline said. Sure. Are you and Clara really married, or was that just something you told the county officer? Colton's hand stilled on the wood he was working. We're legally married, got the certificate and everything. But you don't love her. It wasn't a question, but Colton answered anyway. We barely know each other. And yet you married her. For Lily. So the county wouldn't take her away. Adeline smiled, but it was sad. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard, or the most practical. I can't decide which. Probably both. Colton went back to work. Claire's a good person. Smart, strong, doesn't take nonsense from anyone. I could do a lot worse. Could you do better? The question caught Colton off guard. He turned to look at Adeline, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Lily, her expression unreadable. I don't know, he said honestly. Haven't thought about it much. You should. After all this is over, after my father's men are gone, you're going to be stuck with her for real. Might want to figure out how you feel about that. Colton didn't answer. Mostly because he didn't have an answer. He and Clara had been so focused on surviving, on taking care of Lily, on dealing with one crisis after another, that they hadn't stopped to think about what came after, about what being married actually meant beyond the legal protection it provided. Clara returned an hour later with the wagon loaded. She'd gotten ammunition, food, candles, more blankets, and a few boards she'd somehow convinced the lumber yard to sell her on credit. "Any trouble in town?" Colton asked, helping her unload. "Define trouble." "Did anyone follow you? Ask questions?" "There were 3 men at the saloon I've never seen before. They were asking about an abandoned baby, about anyone who might have taken one in recently." Clara glanced at Adeline through the open door. The description they gave matched her. Dark hair, blue eyes, expensive clothes. "They say anything else?" "They're offering a reward, $500 for information leading to her return." Clara grabbed a sack of flour, started carrying it inside. "That's a lot of money around here. Someone's going to talk." "Someone probably already has." "Probably." Clara set the flour down, looked around the small homestead. "So, what's the plan? We can't hold off armed men indefinitely." "Don't need to hold them off indefinitely. Just need to hold them off long enough." "Long enough for what?" "For them to realize we're serious. For them to understand that taking Lily isn't going to be as easy as Marcus Beaumont thought." Colton started loading the shotgun. Men like that, men who work for powerful people, they're used to threats working, used to people backing down when they show force. But if we stand up to them, if we make it clear we're willing to die before we hand over the baby, maybe they'll back off. "Or maybe they'll just kill us and take her anyway," Clara said. "Maybe, but at least we'll have tried." They worked through the night preparing. Colton reinforced every shutter, barricaded the door with furniture and boards, created makeshift cover inside the homestead where they could take shelter if bullets started flying. Clara organized their supplies, set up a system for feeding and changing Lily that could be done quickly under stress, prepared bandages, and medical supplies for wounds she hoped they wouldn't need. Adeline helped where she could, but mostly she held Lily. Held her like she was afraid to let go, like the moment she set the baby down, someone would come and snatch her away. Dawn came gray and cold. Colton stood at the window, watching the landscape slowly emerge from darkness. Everything was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. "They'll come today," Adeline said. She was sitting on the floor, Lily sleeping against her chest. "I can feel it." Clara handed out cold biscuits and water for breakfast. None of them were hungry, but they ate anyway. No telling when they'd have another chance. Around mid-morning, Colton saw the riders. 5 of them, moving slowly along the ridge about half a mile out. They weren't trying to hide, weren't trying to be subtle. They wanted to be seen. "They're here," he said quietly. Clara moved to the other window, looked out. Adeline stayed where she was, but her whole body had gone rigid. The riders stopped at the top of the ridge, sat there for a long minute, 5 dark shapes against the winter sky. Then they started moving again, heading down the slope toward the homestead. "Get away from the windows," Colton said. "Both of you." Clara grabbed the revolver, positioned herself behind the table they'd overturned for cover. Adeline pressed herself into the corner. Lily clutched tight against her chest, and for the first time Colton saw real terror in her eyes. The riders approached slowly, deliberately. When they were about 50 yards out, they stopped. One of them, a big man with a black beard, raised his hand. "Adeline Beaumont," he shouted. His voice carried easily across the frozen ground. "We know you're in there. Your father sent us to bring you home." Adeline flinched at the sound of her name. Her breathing had gone shallow and fast. "You don't have to answer," Clara whispered. But Adeline shook her head. "They already know I'm here. Denying it won't help." She raised her voice, though it shook. "I'm not going back, Marcus." The bearded man, Marcus, apparently, laughed. "That's not your decision to make, Miss Beaumont. Your father wants you home. You know how he feels about disobedience." "My father tried to have my daughter killed. Your father tried to protect you from scandal, protect the family name. You should be grateful." "Grateful?" Adeline's voice cracked. "He took my baby from me." "You gave birth to a bastard. What did you expect him to do?" Colton could see Adeline shaking, could see her about to say something that would make this situation worse. He stepped up to the window, staying to the side where he'd be harder to hit, and raised his voice. "She's not going anywhere with you." Marcus's attention shifted. "Who the hell are you?" I'm the man who found the baby your boss left to die on railroad tracks. I'm the man who's been keeping her alive. And I'm the man who's telling you to turn around and ride back to Denver. That baby belongs to the Beaumont family. That baby was marked unwanted and left to be run over by a train. Beaumonts gave up their claim when they did that. You're making a mistake, friend. Mr. Beaumont is not a man you want as an enemy. Too late. Already am one. Colton shifted the rifle in his hands, made sure Marcus saw it. And I'm not your friend. The riders had spread out now, forming a loose semicircle around the homestead. Colton counted them again. 5 men. All armed. All looking like they knew how to use what they were carrying. Marcus leaned forward in his saddle. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to send out Miss Beaumont and the baby. You're going to do it now before anyone gets hurt. If you cooperate, we'll forget this ever happened. If you don't, he let the sentence hang. If we don't, what? Clara called out from her position. You'll shoot us? Kill us? That'll just make this whole mess bigger, won't it? Harder to cover up. Who said anything about shooting? Marcus smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. This homestead's pretty isolated, long way from town. Shame if something happened to it. Fire, maybe. Those can spread so fast in winter when everything's dry. The threat was clear. Colton felt his jaw tighten. Behind him, he heard Clara's sharp intake of breath. You burn this place with us inside, you'll have to explain 3 bodies, Colton said, including your boss's daughter. 3 people died in a tragic accident. Happens all the time on the frontier. Marcus shrugged. Or we could avoid all that unpleasantness? Your choice. Adeline stood up. Still holding Lily, she moved toward the window. Marcus, please, you've known me since I was a child. You taught me to ride. If I work for your father, Miss Beaumont. Whatever I taught you, whatever friendship we might have had, that comes second to my job. And my job is to bring you home. His voice softened slightly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I can't go back. You know what he'll do to me. He's your father. He'll forgive you eventually. And my daughter? Will he forgive her too? Marcus didn't answer that. He didn't need to. Adeline turned to Colton and Clara. Her face was pale but determined. Let me go. Take Lily somewhere safe and let me go. It's the only way. No, Colton said. You'll die if you fight them. All of you. Maybe, but we're not handing you over to men who'll either kill you or lock you away for the rest of your life. Colton. No. He looked at her, then at Clara, then back at the riders outside. We stand together, or we don't stand at all. Clara stood up from behind the table, moved to stand next to Colton at the window. She was holding the revolver in both hands, trying to keep it steady. He's right. We're not giving them anything. Adeline looked between them, something breaking and reforming in her expression. You're both insane. Been hearing that a lot lately, Colton said. Then, louder, to Marcus. Here's my counteroffer. You ride back to Denver and tell your boss his daughter is safe, his granddaughter is safe, and if he wants to see them again, he can come here himself and ask nicely. That's not going to happen. Then I guess we're at an impasse. Marcus sat back in his saddle, exchanged looks with the other riders. They seemed to be having a silent conversation. Finally, Marcus nodded, like he'd come to a decision. You've got until sunset to reconsider, he called out. After that, we stop being polite. Then they turned their horses and rode back up the ridge. But they didn't leave. Just moved far enough away to be out of rifle range, then stopped and set up camp. Watching. Waiting. Colton stepped back from the window. His heart was pounding and his mouth was dry, but he kept his face calm. Clara lowered the revolver, her hands shaking. What happens at sunset? She asked. They'll either try to take us by force or they'll make good on the threat to burn us out. Colton checked the rifle, made sure it was fully loaded. Either way, we need to be ready. We can't fight 5 armed men. We don't have to fight them. We just have to survive long enough for them to realize this isn't worth it. And if they decide it is worth it. Colton didn't have an answer for that. The day dragged on like something wounded. They took turns watching the riders on the ridge, took turns holding Lily, took turns trying not to think about what sunset would bring. The baby fussed more than usual, like she could sense the tension in the air. Adeline sang to her quietly, old songs in French that her own mother had sung to her. Around 3 in the afternoon, Clara said, I have an idea. Colton looked at her. I'm listening. What if we sent word to town? Got people to come out here as witnesses? Marcus said Beaumont has too much influence. No one will help. Not officially, maybe. But if there are witnesses, if people see what's happening here, it's harder to make us just disappear. Clara was pacing now, working through it. Doc Morrison would come, maybe some others. Even if they don't help directly, just having them here changes things. Adeline was shaking her head. My father will destroy anyone who stands against him. You'd just be putting more people in danger. Maybe, Clara said. Or maybe that's exactly what we need. Your father can make 3 people disappear without questions. Can he make a dozen disappear? 2 dozen? You don't know him. You're right, I don't. But I know people. And I know that powerful men like your father rely on everyone being too scared to fight back. The moment someone stands up, others follow. Clara looked at Colton. It's worth a try. Colton thought about it. Thought about the risks, the potential for more people getting hurt. But Clara was right about one thing. The more witnesses there were, the harder it would be for Marcus and his men to do whatever they were planning. All right, he said finally. But who goes? We can't leave the homestead undefended. I'll go, Clara said. I'm faster on horseback than you think, and people in town know me. They might actually listen. And if Marcus's men stop you on the way, then I'll tell them I'm going for supplies, or visiting a sick friend, or literally anything except the truth. Clara was already grabbing her coat. I can be there and back before sunset if I hurry. Colton wanted to argue, wanted to say it was too dangerous, that she should stay where it was safer. But the truth was, nowhere was safe right now, and they needed help. Be careful, he said. Clara paused at the door, looked back at him. For a moment something passed between them, something that might have been understanding or trust or the beginning of something neither of them had words for yet. I will, she said. Then she was gone, slipping out the back way where the riders on the ridge couldn't see her clearly. Colton and Adeline waited. Lily slept, woke, cried, was comforted, slept again. The sun moved across the sky with terrible slowness. The riders on the ridge didn't move at all. Around 4 o'clock, Adeline said, Can I ask you something? Go ahead. If this goes wrong, if something happens to me, will you and Clara keep Lily? Colton looked at her. Nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, we'll keep her safe, I promise. Adeline nodded slowly. She's lucky to have found you, both of you. She looked down at the baby in her arms. I spent 2 months searching, 2 months of riding through strange towns, asking questions, following rumors, and the whole time I was terrified I'd find her too late, find her already dead or taken somewhere I could never reach. But you didn't. You found her alive and safe. Thanks to you. Adeline's eyes were bright. I don't know if I ever said that properly. Thank you. For being in the right place at the right time, for caring when you had no reason to. Colton didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to watching the ridge. The sun was touching the horizon when Clara came back. She wasn't alone. Behind her wagon came another wagon, and behind that came riders. Colton counted 8 people total. Doc Morrison was driving one wagon. The sheriff of Ridge Hollow, a man named Cooper who usually didn't stick his neck out for anything, was riding alongside. There were others too, people from town Colton recognized but didn't know well. Clara pulled up in front of the homestead and jumped down from the wagon seat. I brought help. I can see that. Doc Morrison climbed down from his wagon with a grunt. Heard you might be having some trouble out here. You could say that. Colton gestured toward the ridge. 5 men up there sent by Marcus Beaumont. They want Adeline and the baby. We're not giving them up. Sheriff Cooper moved his horse closer, squinted up at the ridge. Those the men who've been asking questions in town? Probably. They got any legal authority? None that I know of. Cooper nodded slowly. Then they've got no right to be threatening folks on their own property. That's harassment, maybe worse. He raised his voice, called up toward the ridge. You men, this is Sheriff Cooper. You're on private land and I'm ordering you to leave. There was a long pause. Then Marcus appeared at the edge of the ridge. He looked at the assembled people, at the sheriff, at the fact that his private operation had suddenly become very public. This doesn't concern you, Sheriff. Hell, it doesn't. These are citizens of my county and you're threatening them. That makes it my concern. Cooper rested his hand on the gun at his hip, not threatening exactly, but not friendly either. You've got two choices. Leave peacefully or leave in handcuffs. Your call. Marcus stared down at them for a long moment. Colton could practically see him weighing options, trying to figure out if this was still salvageable. Finally, he spat into the dirt and turned his horse. "This isn't over," he shouted at the homestead. "Mr. Beaumont doesn't forget." Then he and his men rode off, disappearing over the ridge and into the gathering darkness. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Colton felt his legs go weak, and he had to lean against the wall to stay upright. It was over. For now, at least, it was over. Clara was suddenly in front of him, her face flushed with cold and adrenaline. "Are you all right?"
"Yeah, you?" "Terrified, but yeah." She looked around at the people who'd come. "Thank you, all of you. I know this was a risk." "Beaumont might own half of Colorado," Doc Morrison said, "but he doesn't own Ridge Hollow. Not yet, anyway." He looked at Colton. "Though I suspect you've made yourself some powerful enemies today." "Add them to the list," Colton said.
Inside the homestead, Adeline was crying again. But this time they were different tears. Relief, maybe. Or exhaustion. Or just the release of 2 months of fear finally ending. She looked up when they came in, Lily still held tight against her chest. "They're gone?" "For now," Colton said. "He'll try again. My father doesn't give up. Then we'll fight again." Clara sat down next to her. "But today we won. Today you're safe. Your daughter is safe. That counts for something." Adeline nodded, wiping at her eyes. Yes, it does." The people from town didn't stay long. They'd done what they came to do, provided witnesses, scared off the immediate threat. But before they left, Doc Morrison pulled Colton aside. "You know this doesn't end here," he said quietly. "I know. Beaumont has resources you can't imagine. Legal resources, political resources. He can make your life hell without ever setting foot in Ridge Hollow. Let him try." Doc studied his face. "You really mean that? Every word. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the stupidest." Colton smiled. "I'm starting to think those might be the same thing." After everyone left, the three of them sat in the quiet homestead. Lily had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from all the noise and confusion. Adeline looked down at her daughter with an expression Colton couldn't quite read. "I need to make a decision," she said quietly. Clara and Colton both looked at her. "About Lily. About what happens next." Adeline's voice was steady, but Colton could hear the effort it took. "I want my daughter. I've wanted her since the moment she was born. But wanting something and being able to have it aren't the same thing." "What are you saying?" Clara asked. "I'm saying that as long as I'm her mother, she'll never be safe. My father will never stop trying to get rid of her, to erase the scandal she represents. But if I'm not her mother..." Adeline trailed off, looked at them. "You're married. You're stable. You've already been taking care of her. If I gave up my legal claim, if I let you adopt her properly, she'd be safe." "Adeline," Clara started. "I'm not saying I want to. I'm saying it might be the only way to protect her." Adeline's voice broke. "I'm saying that maybe the best thing I can do for my daughter is let her go." The silence that followed was profound. Outside, night had fallen completely. Inside, the fire crackled and sent shadows dancing across the walls. Finally, Colton said, "What if there was another way?" "What way?" "What if you didn't give her up? What if you stayed?" Adeline stared at him. "Stayed where?" "Here, with us." Colton looked at Clara, saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. "We've got room. Not much, but enough. You could help with Lily, help with the homestead. Stay close to your daughter without your father being able to reach you." "You'd do that? Let me stay?" "Why not? We're already dealing with one impossible situation. What's one more?" Adeline started crying again, and Clara moved to put an arm around her shoulders. Lily stirred in her sleep but didn't wake. And in that small homestead on the edge of the Colorado frontier, 3 broken people who'd been thrown together by chance and circumstance made another decision that would change everything. They decided to become a family, not in any traditional sense, not in any way that made sense to the outside world, but in the way that mattered, the way that meant they'd stand together, fight together, and refuse to let the world tear apart what they'd built. Even if what they'd built was strange and complicated and held together mostly by stubbornness and hope, it was theirs. And that was enough. Winter hit hard after that. Not the kind of cold that made you uncomfortable, but the kind that killed if you weren't careful, the kind that turned the world into something hostile and unforgiving. The three of them learned to live together in the small homestead out of necessity first, then something else. Colton finished the second room by mid-January, which meant Adeline had her own space instead of sleeping on the floor by the fire. Clara started a small garden in what would be the yard come spring, planning ahead even when planning ahead seemed pointless. Adeline took over most of Lily's care during the day, singing to her in French and English, teaching her daughter things she was too young to understand but wouldn't always be. It wasn't smooth. Nothing about it was smooth. Adeline had nightmares. Colton would wake to hear her crying in the other room, would hear Clara get up and go to her, would hear them talking in low voices until the crying stopped. During the day, Adeline would sometimes just freeze, staring at nothing, and it would take minutes before she came back to herself. The weight of what she'd been through, what she'd lost, what she'd almost lost again, it sat on her like something physical. Clara threw herself into work with an intensity that worried Colton. She was always doing something, cooking, cleaning, mending, planning, organizing. She couldn't sit still. The one time Colton suggested she rest, she'd looked at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "If I stop moving, I start thinking," she'd said. "And if I start thinking, I remember that we're three people trying to survive on nothing with a powerful man in Denver who wants us dead, raising a baby in the middle of nowhere. So I'd rather keep moving." Colton understood that. He had his own ways of not thinking too hard. Chopping wood until his shoulders screamed, riding fence line in weather that should have kept him inside, fixing things that didn't really need fixing just to have something to do with his hands. They were all running from something. The difference was they were running together. The first real fight came in February. It started over something stupid. Colton had forgotten to close the door to the second room properly, and the cold had gotten in, making Lily fussy all night. Adeline snapped at him about being careless. Clara defended him. Adeline said Clara didn't understand because Lily wasn't really hers. Clara said at least she'd been there from the beginning, had earned her place in Lily's life instead of showing up after someone else did the hard work. The words hung in the air like poison. Adeline's face went white. "You think I wanted to miss those weeks? You think I chose to leave my daughter on railroad tracks?" "That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant." Adeline's voice was shaking. "You think because you found her, because you kept her alive, that makes you her real mother, but you're not. I am, and no amount of playing house is going to change that." Clara's expression went hard. "Playing house? I married a stranger to keep the county from taking her away. I lost my job, my reputation, my entire life for this baby. Don't you dare tell me I'm playing house." Colton stepped between them. "Both of you need to stop." "Stay out of this," Adeline said. "This is my house. I'm not staying out of anything." Colton looked at Clara, then at Adeline. "You're both Lily's mother, both of you. Clara's the one who kept her alive those first weeks. Adeline's the one who gave birth to her, who searched for months to find her. She's lucky to have both of you, and you're both lucky to have each other. So stop trying to figure out who matters more, and start figuring out how to make this work." The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Clara grabbed her coat and walked out. Just walked out into the February cold without another word. Adeline sat down hard on the floor, put her face in her hands. "I didn't mean that. About playing house, I know." Colton sat down next to her. "But you need to apologize anyway." "I know that too." They sat there for a while. Lily was sleeping, oblivious to the tension. Outside, they could hear Clara chopping wood with more force than was strictly necessary. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Adeline said quietly. "What is?" "Sharing her. Watching someone else comfort her when she cries, feed her, hold her. I know it's selfish. I know Clara's been amazing with her, but sometimes I look at them together and I feel like I'm the outsider, like I'm the guest in my own daughter's life." "You're not a guest." "Then what am I?" Adeline looked at him. "I'm not her legal mother anymore. Clara and you are. I'm just the woman who gave birth to her and then lost her. You didn't lose her. You found her. Against impossible odds, you found her." Colton stood up, offered Adeline his hand. "Come on, let's go talk to Clara before she chops through the entire woodpile." They found Clara by the shed, sweating despite the cold, surrounded by enough split wood to last them until summer. She didn't look up when they approached. "Clara," Adeline said, "I'm sorry. What I said was cruel and unfair. Clara swung the axe. Wood split with a satisfying crack. You meant it, though. I meant it in the moment. I was angry and scared, and I lashed out. But that doesn't make it true. Adeline moved closer. You're not playing house. You've been more of a mother to Lily than I've had the chance to be. And I'm grateful. Even when it hurts, I'm grateful. Clara finally stopped, leaned on the axe handle. I'm sorry, too, for what I said about you showing up late. You didn't have a choice. I know that. Can we agree that we're both disasters and move on? Clara laughed. It was weak, but it was real. Yeah, we can do that. They went back inside together. Lily woke up hungry and Adeline fed her while Clara made coffee and Colton pretended he wasn't watching both of them with something complicated happening in his chest. This was his life now. This strange, broken family that didn't make sense to anyone, including themselves. He was starting to think he wouldn't trade it for anything. Spring came late that year, creeping in like it wasn't sure it was welcome. But when it finally arrived, it brought changes. The first change was Marcus Beaumont himself. He arrived alone on a warm April morning, riding a horse that probably cost more than everything Colton owned put together. He stopped at the edge of the property and just sat there until Colton came out to meet him. Up close, Marcus Beaumont looked older than Colton had expected. Probably in his 60s, with gray hair and a face that had seen too much sun and too many hard decisions. But his eyes were sharp and calculating. Mr. Reeves, he said without dismounting. Mr. Beaumont. I've come to speak with my daughter. She doesn't want to see you. I didn't ask what she wants. I'm her father, and I'm the man standing between you and her. So unless you've got legal authority to be here, you can turn that expensive horse around and leave. Beaumont studied him for a long moment. You're the one who found my granddaughter on the railroad tracks. I am. You saved her life. I did. Thank you. The words seemed to cost him something. Whatever else has happened, whatever mistakes have been made, you saved an innocent child's life. I'm grateful for that. Colton didn't know what to say. Of all the things he'd expected from Marcus Beaumont, gratitude wasn't one of them. Can I see her? Beaumont asked. My daughter, I mean. Just for a moment. I won't take her. I won't threaten anyone. I just want to talk. That's up to her. Will you ask? Colton went inside. Adeline was teaching Lily how to grip things with her tiny hands, laughing when the baby grabbed her finger and held on. She looked up when Colton entered. Who was that? Your father. All the color drained from Adeline's face. No. He says he just wants to talk, says he won't try anything. You believe him? I don't know, but he's alone. No armed men, no threats, just him. Colton moved closer. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. I'll send him away. Adeline looked down at Lily. The baby was making happy sounds, completely unaware of the drama happening around her. He's my father, she said quietly. Whatever else he's done, he's still my father. She handed Lily to Clara, stood up, smoothed her dress, took a deep breath. All right, I'll talk to him, but I want you there, both of you. So they all went outside together. Marcus Beaumont was still on his horse, waiting with the patience of someone who was used to getting what he wanted eventually. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. Something moved across his face. Regret, maybe, or grief, or something Colton didn't have a name for. Adeline, he said. Father. You look well. No thanks to you. Beaumont flinched. I suppose I deserve that. He finally dismounted, stood there holding his horse's reins. I came to apologize for what I did, for what I ordered done. I was trying to protect you, protect our family name, but He trailed off. I was wrong. Adeline's laugh was bitter. You tried to have my daughter killed and you were wrong? That's quite an understatement. I know. I know what I did was unforgivable. I've spent the last 4 months realizing that. Beaumont looked at the homestead, at Colton and Clara standing protectively near Adeline. When my men came back and told me what happened here, told me about how these people stood up to them, how half the town came out to defend you, I started to understand something. What? That I'd already lost you. That I'd lost you the moment I chose my pride over your happiness.
chose our family's reputation over my own grandchild's life. Beaumont's voice cracked. And I'm sorry, Adeline. I'm sorry for all of it. Adeline was crying now, silent tears running down her face. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back the months I spent searching for my daughter, thinking she might be dead. Sorry doesn't... I know it doesn't. Beaumont took a step closer. But it's all I have. That and a promise that I won't interfere anymore. Won't send men to take the baby, won't try to force you back to Denver. You want to stay here, raising your daughter with these people? That's your choice. I won't stand in the way. Why should I believe you?
Because I'm tired, Adeline. Tired of being the kind of man who values reputation over family. Tired of losing everyone I love because I'm too stubborn to admit when I'm wrong. Beaumont looked at Lily, who Clara was holding. Can I see her? My granddaughter? Adeline looked at Clara. Clara looked at Colton. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Adeline nodded. You can see her, but if you try anything, I won't, I promise. Clara brought Lily forward. The baby was 5 months old now, starting to really see the world around her, starting to smile and make sounds that weren't just crying. She looked at Marcus Beaumont with those blue eyes that were the same as her mother's. Beaumont stared at her. His hands were shaking. She looks like you did, he told Adeline. When you were a baby. Same eyes, same expression.
She's beautiful, Adeline said quietly. And she's alive because of them. She gestured to Colton and Clara. Because they cared when you didn't. I know. Beaumont reached out, let Lily grab his finger. The baby held on, testing her grip. Something in the old man's face crumbled. I'm sorry, he whispered. Not to Adeline this time, to Lily. I'm sorry for what I almost did to you.
They stood there in the April sunshine, this broken family trying to figure out how to be something other than broken. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe it would never be forgiveness. But it was a start. Before Beaumont left, he did one more thing. He pulled an envelope from his coat, handed it to Adeline. This is a legal document transferring ownership of the ranch property outside Denver to you. 200 acres, fully operational. If you want to come back, if you want to raise your daughter there, it's yours. No strings attached. Adeline stared at the envelope. I don't want your money. It's not money. It's land. It's security. It's a future for my granddaughter. Beaumont looked at Colton and Clara. For all of you, if you want it. I'm not trying to buy you back, Adeline. I'm trying to give you options. He mounted his horse, looked down at them one last time. I'll be in Denver if you ever want to talk. No pressure, no expectations, just an open door. Then he rode away, leaving them standing there with an envelope that held a future none of them had expected. That night they talked about it. About the ranch, about Denver, about whether staying in Ridge Hollow made sense when they were barely surviving. It's too much, Adeline said. Too convenient. He's trying to control us in a different way. Maybe, Clara said. Or maybe he's actually trying to make amends. People do change, sometimes. Do they, though? Adeline looked at Colton. You've been quiet. What do you think? Colton had been thinking about the homestead they'd built together, about the second room he'd finished, about Clara's garden starting to come up in the yard, about the life they'd cobbled together from nothing. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. I think, he said slowly, that we should do whatever's best for Lily. If that's staying here, we stay here. If that's going to Denver, we go to Denver. But we decide together, all three of us. A vote then, Clara said. All in favor of staying here? Colton raised his hand. Clara looked surprised, but raised hers too. You're both insane, Adeline said. That ranch in Denver has resources we can't imagine. Running water, help, security. Here we're barely getting by. But here we're free, Colton said. Here we make our own choices without your father looking over our shoulders. Here Lily grows up knowing she was wanted, knowing 3 people chose to build a life around her instead of being forced into it. Adeline was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, I vote we stay too. Clara laughed. That's unanimous then. We're officially the stupidest people in Colorado. Probably. Colton looked at both of them. But we're stupid together. That counts for something. The months that followed weren't easy. They never were. Money was tight, the work was endless, and there were days when Colton wondered if they'd made the right choice. But there were good days too. Days when Lily learned to sit up on her own, and all three of them cheered like she'd done something miraculous. Days when Clara's garden produced actual vegetables, and they felt rich for the first time in months. Days when Adeline sang while cooking dinner, and Colton realized he couldn't remember the last time she'd had nightmares. Slowly, without any of them really noticing when it happened, they stopped being three separate people forced together by circumstances. They became something else. A family, not a normal one. Not the kind anyone would recognize or approve of, but theirs. The second real change came in June, when Clara sat Colton down and said, "We need to talk." Those 4 words had never led anywhere good in Colton's experience. He braced himself. About what? About us? About this marriage? Clara was twisting her hands together, nervous in a way he rarely saw. "We've been legally married for 7 months. We've been living together, raising Lily together, building a life together, but we've never actually talked about what that means." "What do you want it to mean?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Clara looked at him directly. "Do you want this to be real, or are we just going through the motions because it's practical?" Colton thought about that. About watching Clara with Lily. About the way she argued with Adeline over the best way to cook beans. About how she'd look sometimes when she didn't know he was watching, tired and determined and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with who she was. "I want it to be real," he said quietly. "If you do." Clara's expression did something complicated. "I'm not easy to live with." "Neither am I. I'm stubborn and opinionated, and I don't know how to stop trying to control everything. I'm closed off, and I don't talk about things I should talk about, and I have no idea how to be a husband. So we're both disasters." "Seems that way." Clara moved closer. "But we're disasters who chose each other, who keep choosing each other, every day. That has to mean something." "It means everything," Colton said. She kissed him then, not like that businesslike peck on the cheek at their courthouse wedding, but real and warm and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say with words. When they pulled apart, Clara was smiling. "So we're doing this? Making this marriage real?" "Been real for a while, I think. We just didn't notice." That night, Adeline asked if she could talk to them both. They sat around the table after Lily had gone to sleep, drinking the terrible coffee they'd gotten used to. "I've been thinking," Adeline said, "about my place here, about what I am to Lily, to both of you." Colton felt his stomach tighten. If this is about leaving, it's not. It's about staying, but staying in the right way. Adeline took a breath. "I want Lily to know who I am. Want her to know I'm her birth mother, that I searched for her, that I never stopped loving her. But I also want her to know that you two are her real parents, the ones who kept her alive, who built a home for her, who chose her when the world said she was unwanted." "Adeline," Clara started. "Let me finish." Adeline smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. "I want to be part of her life. Want to watch her grow up, teach her things, be there for her. But I don't want to pretend I'm something I'm not. You're her mother, Clara, in every way that matters. And Colton's her father. I don't know what I am, but I want to figure it out together." Clara was crying now, too. "You're family. That's what you are. You're Lily's family and ours." "Yeah," Colton said. "What she said." They cried together that night, the 3 of them. Cried for everything they'd lost and everything they'd found. Cried because sometimes that's the only way to let go of the past enough to hold on to the future. A year after Colton found Lily on those railroad tracks, they made a trip back to the place where it all started. All 4 of them went, Colton, Clara, Adeline, and Lily, who was almost walking now, who could say a few words, who smiled at everyone like the world was full of people who wanted her. They stood by the tracks in the early morning cold. It looked the same as it had that day. Same rails, same rocks, same indifferent landscape. But everything was different. Adeline knelt by the spot where her daughter had nearly died. She touched the rails like they were something sacred. "I almost lost you here," she whispered. Lily, who didn't understand but seemed to sense the importance, reached for her. Adeline picked her up, held her close. Colton and Clara stood back, giving Adeline her moment. Clara's hand found Colton's and held on.
You ever think about how lucky we got? Clara asked quietly. All the time.
If you'd ridden past that morning, if you'd been 5 minutes later, if any of 1,000 things had gone differently. But they didn't. Colton squeezed her hand. They didn't, and we're here. A train whistle sounded in the distance, the same sound that had nearly meant death a year ago. Now it was just a train passing through, indifferent to the small miracle that had happened in its path. Adeline stood up, Lily in her arms. She looked at Colton and Clara with something fierce and grateful in her expression. Thank you, she said, for everything. For her, for me, for giving us both a chance when we didn't deserve one. Everyone deserves a chance, Clara said, even people the world gives up on. They walked back to the wagon together, Lily babbling happily about nothing, pointing at birds and clouds and all the ordinary wonders of the world. Behind them, the railroad tracks stretched into the distance, empty and waiting for the next thing to come along. Life at the homestead continued. It was never easy. There were lean times when they wondered if they'd make it through another winter. There were arguments and misunderstandings and days when the weight of everything felt too heavy to carry. But there were good times too. More good times than bad, eventually. Lily grew. Learned to walk, learned to talk, learned that she had 3 adults who would move mountains for her if that's what she needed. She called Clara Mama and Colton Papa, and Adeline was just Addie, and somehow that worked for all of them. Marcus Beaumont visited twice a year. Never stayed long, never pushed, just sat with his granddaughter for a few hours and then left again. The relationship between him and Adeline would never be what it was, but it became something. A careful peace built on understanding that some mistakes can't be fixed, only lived with. Clara started teaching again, this time out of the homestead. A few families in the area brought their children to learn reading and writing and arithmetic. It wasn't the formal schoolhouse she'd had before, but it was hers in a way that Job never had been. Colton worked land that was his own for the first time in his life, built things that would last, planted things that would grow, created something permanent in a world that had always felt temporary. And Adeline found herself, found that she was stronger than she'd thought, that she could survive things that should have broken her, that she could love her daughter even when that love looked different than she'd imagined. 3 years after that morning on the railroad tracks, they were sitting on the porch they'd finally finished building. Lily was playing in the yard, chasing a chicken with the kind of single-minded determination that made all 3 adults laugh. You think she'll remember any of this? Adeline asked. When she's older? The hard parts, I mean. Probably not the specifics, Claire said. But she'll remember feeling safe, feeling wanted. That's what matters. Is it enough, though? For us to have pulled her out of one bad situation into this, Adeline gestured around. This barely functional life we're living? Colton had been quiet, but he spoke up now. She's alive. She's healthy. She's loved by 3 people who'd die for her without thinking twice. Yeah, we're barely getting by sometimes. Yeah, this isn't the life any of us planned, but it's a real life, an honest one. She'll grow up knowing she matters, knowing she was worth fighting for. Worth everything, Claire added softly. They watched Lily catch the chicken, then immediately lose interest and start examining a rock instead. So easily distracted, so completely certain that the world was safe and good and hers to explore. That certainty, that trust, they'd built that. Together. Out of nothing but stubbornness and love and the refusal to give up when giving up would have been easier. We did good, Adeline said. Didn't we? Yeah, Colton said. We did good. And maybe that was the thing about family. Real family, the kind you choose and build and fight for. It didn't have to be perfect. Didn't have to make sense to anyone else. It just had to be yours. Years later, when Lily was old enough to ask questions, they told her the truth, all of it, about the railroad tracks and the train that almost killed her, about the word unwanted, written on a scrap of paper, about 3 broken people who came together to save a baby who was supposed to disappear. She cried when she heard it. Then she hugged all 3 of them and said, I'm glad you found me. We're glad too, Colton told her. And he meant it. Despite everything, the fear, the poverty, the struggle, the constant feeling that they were one bad day away from losing everything, he meant it. Because some things are worth the cost. Some people are worth fighting for. And sometimes the family you build from wreckage and hope and impossible choices turns out to be exactly the family you needed all along. The baby who was marked unwanted became a child who knew beyond doubt that she was wanted. Wanted so much that 3 strangers became a family, that a lonely cowboy became a father, that a disgraced school teacher became a mother, that a broken woman found redemption in her daughter's survival. Love isn't ownership. It never was. It's not about blood or legal papers or who has the right to claim someone. It's about showing up, about refusing to walk away when things get hard, about choosing every single day to be there for the people who need you. And under that endless Colorado sky, in a homestead that shouldn't have survived but did, 3 imperfect people learned that lesson better than most ever do. They learned it from a baby who almost died on railroad tracks, and instead became the center of something worth living for.